Hello, namaskar, adab, everyone. We're already in December and feeling the Christmas festivity all around us. The year seems to have whizzed past in a supersonic speed. It feels just like the other day that I packed away the Christmas tree, and now it's time to put it up again. Well, don't we all love December? It's all about friends, family, and fun. Triveni Media is a platform with a purpose, and our values are to empower, inspire, and entertain. Guests on our programs are powerful people. I call them powerful because they have touched the lives of others positively through their work. They have helped change lives. They have contributed to the society and the planet at large. Today, I'm excited and honored to have a special guest on The Magic in You with Shonali. He has been on a program before, hosted by my dear friend and Triveni Media partner, Shibani. He is none other than Dr. Purnendu Nath, who is also known as Puru the Guru. Well, how do I introduce Puru? Where do I start? He is a multifaceted man. He's a Cambridge graduate in finance and is a mentor, scientist, fund manager, and an endurance athlete. He's an avid runner and has he ran in different geographical places. Today, he is going to talk about mindfulness and running. And I welcome Puru the Guru.
Hi, Shonali.
Hi,
Thanks for that
Puru.
introduction. Thanks
So
for that
lovely to have
introduction.
you here with us.
Thank you. It's lovely to sort of only be with you via the internet, but otherwise it's nice to be where I am here now in South Goa on the beach, where I think it's about 38 degrees now. And the skies are blue, as you can see. And I'm going to enjoy the sunset. The sun will set in just under 2 hours. So I'll get to enjoy that after this conversation. So I guess perhaps the first thing to talk about is what got me to, in some sense, put together thoughts and write about this, what I call the duplet of running and mindfulness. So having come across people I know who both run, people who don't run, people who meditate, people who don't meditate, people who run and also meditate. It struck me when I started mentoring a couple of people relatively recently who had been using meditation apps, and they were also fairly good in terms of their sort of running abilities, their cardiorespiratory endurance. It struck me that they weren't piecing the two things together beautifully. So they told me that they enjoyed meditation and they loved running. But when I started observing how they operated as the weeks went by when I mentored them, it struck me that one of the things that people were perhaps not doing is bringing both these things into their lives in silos. And I'm not saying that I didn't do the same thing many years ago, but I just thought that one of the things that I do is try to help create a shortcut for people, in the sense that as people call me Puru the Guru, the word guru basically means darkness and light. So it's someone who takes you from the darkness to light, who shows you the path. And just like a GPS system where you use Google Maps so you don't get lost trying to find your own way, I try to cut this thing short for people. So what I thought I'd do is write about it. So I put my thoughts together, I wrote about it, and now I'm here speaking about it live. And so that's sort of the motivation behind why I put this thing together. Now, before we even progress too deep into this, I think there's sort of a few, in some sense, not misconceptions perhaps, and also perhaps some confusion that arises in people's minds. So for instance, it's an unfortunate coincidence that both meditation and mindfulness begin with the letter M. And I think one of the key things for people to understand is that meditation is a method, and there's many forms of meditation, and mindfulness is a state. So you can think of mindfulness as, if you need to get to, you need to go from London to Birmingham or from Mumbai to Delhi, then you know your destination, but there are many ways you can get there. And meditation is one of them. So you want to get to a state of mindfulness, meditation is one of them. But perhaps not everybody wants to meditate. And perhaps there are other things that one can do. And I think mindfulness being a state that one wants to be in pretty much all the time if you can, but at least to progress on the path towards being there for large parts of your day, and starting off small as always. So I think that running, being something that needs focus and attention, is a perfect way for those who run to use running to be more mindful, and in being more mindful also improve on their running. So I've seen this now with people I mentor, where they've sometimes been extremely fast runners, but by being more mindful about how they run, they get better at running. And they also begin to see increasingly that running is just a method to get fit. Running isn't the end goal. To be fit is the end goal. And I'm going to rotate the camera a little bit since the light's getting better. So the end goal is to be fit. The end goal isn't to be to be running, right? Because there's better things to do with our lives than to just spend hours and hours on the road or on a treadmill. So I think the key thing to understand is that whereas someone might start off with running in order to get fit and to get physically fit, to not just see that as the end point, but to see that as just a method to a better state of existence. So in line with all of this, I'd say one of the key things to understand is that if you are running, you don't need to run crazy mileage in order to be more mindful. In fact, there's a risk that the more you get obsessed with the running and running longer distances, the less mindful you will be, because you will start getting obsessed with something which is in general not a good thing, and you will probably be more susceptible to injuries and things like that. So you could run just a few kilometers or just a few miles and be extremely mindful about your running, or to become more mindful through your running. So I think that's really key. Now, when we think of when we generally see someone running, from their perspective, all they have is a visual experience. They see someone moving their arms and legs and moving through space. moving along the road or wherever it might be. But the changes that happen within you are things that only you experience. So whether it's your internal physical health, that's something you experience. So the other person sees your gear, they might see your shoes, your GPS watch, and your sunglasses if you're running in the sun. But what they don't see is the changes that happen within you, whether it's to do with your physical health improving, perhaps your cardiorespiratory system getting fitter and more robust, or most importantly, and relevant to this topic, is the whole change in mental state that happens. So in fact, whether you're a runner or not, the more mindful you get, you will experience that yourself, and no one else can see it from the outside. So all of this is literally about improving our internal mental health, to be more mindful, to get all the benefits of any sort of mindfulness practice. And like I said, meditation is just one of them, and running is another. And so to put these two things together is key. Now, one of the things that I keep telling people is that you've got to also be mindful about mindfulness. So I'll often come across people who will say, you know what, I used to meditate a lot, but it was really good. And then I kind of got busy and then I stopped it. And yeah, I need to resume it again. And for me, I'm quite skeptical when someone says that. I begin to wonder, I just generally think that talk is cheap, and that if you really thought something was good, and if it was that good, then you would do it. So if you believe that brushing your teeth is important, then you brush your teeth every day, right? You don't just say, oh, I got busy with work, and so I decided to stop brushing my teeth for a month. And I'm thinking of taking it up again next year. You don't do that. And just like, say, about maybe 60, 70 years ago, if someone said they were going to go out for a run, people would think that they're a bit crazy, because who goes out and just runs? And now we realize that getting exercise of this kind is absolutely essential for our physical health. I can see that any mindfulness practice is going to become pretty much normal things for humans to do, because as time has moved on and we've got more and more attached to technology, our physical health has worsened, and attached to our physical health is also our mental health. These two things are not separate. So rather than to say, I only have time to run, I only have time to go to the gym, it's good to think of how you could use running along with other things in order to improve your mindfulness. If you're going to run anyway, it makes sense to have this sort of confluence in order to increase your return on the sort of time invested in this. If just as a sort of analogy, if you are going to go to the supermarket and buy groceries for your health, then you're going to look at stuff which is good for your health. And similarly, you're not going to go to the supermarket and buy junk. Similarly, when you're out and thinking of going for a run, why only think of it as being something that's good for your physical health, but it makes sense to also combine it with your sort of mental health or emotional health. So with all of this, I think typically with most things that we do, so the world is quite competitive. People have jobs, they own businesses, and there's a tendency to want to compete. And I think the key thing to understand with any sort of mindfulness practice is that this isn't a competition. It's definitely not a competition with other people. Who cares whether I ran a race and won, right? It really doesn't matter. It's just about our ego. But even with mindfulness, the key thing is to, in some sense, even there, to not really compare with yourself, right? To say, oh, you know what, I did this mindfulness practice, but I didn't get much out of it. Oh, I need to get better, right? You've got to basically be mindful of the fact that you shouldn't even be competing with yourself when it comes to something like this. For other things we do, right? We start going to the gym, we want to get stronger. If you start running, you want to get faster. But I think with something like mindfulness, we have to be really careful that we don't say, oh, I used to meditate for 10 minutes, now I can meditate for half an hour. I mean, it's great if that happens, but if you get too obsessed with that, then I think that's not a very healthy thing to have. So So I talked about how you don't want to be running crazy distances. You don't want to be competing with other people for sure. And you don't want to definitely be competing with other people in terms of mindfulness, or not even with yourself. So now let's think about running. When we generally think of running, we can think of what happens before you head out for a run, during the run, and after a run. So in this sort of pre-run stage, and if you think of internal and external stuff. So what's external is like the weather, the time of the day. So to do a check on the weather, whether you're going to have snow where you are, or sudden showers here, or it might be extremely hot. You want to be mindful of what's happening outside. In fact, on this beach, if one were to run very early in the morning, there are lots of stray dogs that can sometimes be dangerous. So you've got to be kind of mindful of those sorts of things. And then being mindful of what's happening inside you. Have you slept enough? Are you well hydrated? Did you spend most of yesterday not really drinking much water, and you woke up kind of tired, and you're wondering, why am I tired? And it's because you've actually not been hydrated for almost properly hydrated for overnight, and so you want to hydrate properly. So these are sort of these internal checks that you do to become more aware. You don't just say, oh, the alarm's rung, I need to get to work, I need to go out and run a few miles. I mean, that's fine in terms of getting yourself motivated and doing it, but this is where that mindfulness comes in. And this sounds really odd, but wake up in the morning and you check the color of your urine, right? Is it really dark? That means you're dehydrated. Do a check. I check my weight every morning. I'm here in Goa. I carry my weighing scales. I can check my weight every morning. And I know, okay, how am I relative to yesterday and the days before? Is it that I'm dehydrated because my weight seems to be a few hundred grams less than it normally is? So these are sort of the internal checks that you do. And then, you head out for your run. Now, when it comes to running, the actual run, again, I'd say it's good to split it up into internal and external stuff. So external would be, these are sort of my 5 key bits of suggestion to people. Run outside. Don't run indoors on a treadmill unless you have absolutely no choice for some reason. Like if the alternative is that you can't run at all, then of course it makes sense to run on a treadmill. But otherwise, run outside. Try to run in nature or on surfaces that are not just a regular track going round and round and round, because then you'll just sort of you'll be less alert about where it is that you're running, right? You're just going on a track round and round and round. My suggestion is definitely don't listen to music when you're running. People do that, but I think the idea is to be aware of where you are, to listen to the birds, sometimes listen to the trees in the wind. Over here, I can hear the waves. And so definitely, like if someone wants to listen to music, they can. All I'm just saying is that you won't be aware of your environment, which is what every species on this planet tries to do. It tries to be conscious of the things around it. So to drown yourself out with music is, in some places, not safe. The person who accompanied me for part of my first full marathon that I ran in Mumbai, I found out a few months later, unfortunately, he thinks, and we don't really know, was hit by a lorry in Paris when he was running in France. And he was hospitalized. People didn't know who he was. They couldn't identify. He was carrying no identification on him. So it took many days before they figured out who he was, and that he lived in Singapore and he was visiting France for work. So there's a safety risk too. But even beyond that, just to be, if you're running in nature, is just to listen to the sounds of nature. My suggestion is don't run with others if you want to be more mindful. But if you have to for some reason, for safety reasons, for instance, then avoid talking, again, unless it's really necessary. So typically, the few times of the year I might run with somebody, I make it very clear that we'll talk only for the first couple of minutes after we meet. And then once we're into our run, I don't want any talking unless there's a specific need to talk. Now, of course, there might be exceptions. You might meet a friend and you haven't met for many months, and you both enjoy running, and you only have a limited amount of time together, and you enjoy the experience of running together, and you also enjoy each other's company, and you want to have a conversation. And then you bring those two things together. But on a regular basis, I would say that's a complete no-no. I think people who are constantly surrounded by other people, and sometimes it might be live persons, and the rest of the time it's social media, are going to find it very difficult to reach higher states of existence in terms of their mindfulness. So I definitely say, so for instance, Shonali, I know you kind of go out into the woods near your home, and I'm sure you have a different experience when you're running with your children versus when you run on your own. And I'd say enjoy both of them, and sometimes encourage your children to go out running on their own to the extent that it's safe, or get them to sort of perhaps run ahead of you or run behind you, so that they experience running in nature on their own. And I think that's really, really key. So that's sort of, those are the things I'd say in terms of the external environment. Now, the big thing is your internal environment when you're running. So when I run here on this beach, last week, one of the days I was running, it was 41 degrees. I've run here now, I've been in Goa for the last 17 days or so. And so I've run probably about 6 or 7 times. And I was here for a few weeks before that. I never see anyone running at that time. Nobody. And I can understand it's really hot. But so when I do it, I'm very conscious as to why I do it. So I can sense my internal state. I'm running in extreme heat. I typically haven't eaten for about 20 hours before it. And I'm well hydrated. But the key thing is that it makes me much more conscious of how I am inside me. If you are, and I'm not telling people to run in extreme heat, not at all. So I come and run in the sun because I want to sleep enough, and I definitely want to get my vitamin D naturally, so I run in high sun. So the key thing is that you're conscious of the general state of your body inside you. And then the thing that's absolutely essential to do, which is all the things that typically people talk about running, which is your running gait, your strides, your form, and your sort of form when running, right from how your head is all the way down to your toes. And I see this sort of pretty much everywhere I run. So and you know, I haven't run in that many places around the world, but unfortunately, whether I'm running in Hong Kong and I see the Chinese running, or I'm running in the UK and I see the English running, or I'm running in India and I see Indians running, I see all kinds of errors with running. And out of all of these, I must say that I see many more people in London running what I would consider running right compared to, say, in India or in Hong Kong. And this is a pity. I'll tell you why it's a pity. It's a pity because this sort of information as to how to run better is available, right? All you have to do is check up videos on distance running techniques, and you'll see how the Kenyans run, and people are giving you commentary as to the right techniques for running. And people won't do it right from how to breathe. People, even today with the pandemic still not having left us, people will not learn how to breathe correctly when they're running. So I don't know what they're doing with their breathing at other times. And that's a real problem. So this is the whole idea of being mindful. If you're not aware of the fact, I think I'm going to turn this around a bit more. If you're not aware of the fact that you're not even breathing right, then that's a real problem, right? You've got to ask yourself, hang on, I'm going out there every day, I'm doing these miles, and yeah, it's great, I'm burning calories, but to what extent is it making me more mindful about my actual existence, my physical existence? And I'm doing this movement, in what way is it right? I'm breathing perhaps 20 times a minute. Like, am I even breathing correctly? And this is a real issue. So, and okay, this is breathing, and then we go all the way down to our foot strike. People will run with they'll heel strike, which is a terrible thing to do. And I used to do that a long time ago, but this was at a time when there wasn't much information around. And now we know this information's out there. And so sometimes you have people who run fast, they'll win races, but they're winning races despite not running right, as opposed to getting better with their running through the process of learning to run right. So there's a whole bunch of these things, and I could go on for quite a while about this, but I won't. But the important thing is to become aware that perhaps there is something that you could be doing better, and then to be focused on it and get better at it. Then we come to, in some sense, I guess, the post-run period. You finish a run, and typically what you'll find is that you're in a better mental state. Even if you're physically tired, your mind is more at ease, you're more relaxed, you have a better mood. So if you had a slightly low mood because things weren't going well for you this week, you might find that actually you just generally feel lighter. And this is true with most forms of exercise. So perhaps it doesn't happen so easily with walking. Definitely if you're walking on a treadmill, you're not so likely to find it. If you walk in nature, you're probably going to get that. But definitely the more intense your exercise, you're going to feel that sense of elation. And it only happens because your brain's producing certain chemicals that make you feel good. So to observe that, and then I think what's really important is to journal your running. So but perhaps not be obsessed about it. I think so. I enjoy data. I enjoy keeping track. So what I do is fun and relaxing for me. For somebody else who observes exactly what I do, they might think it's quite stressful. But the key thing is to start doing it in a small way. So for instance, perhaps you might first just on the first day note, like the date you ran and how much you ran. And then you might start noting the time that you ran, and then the time that you ran for, and therefore what pace you ran at. And then you might say whom you ran with, and perhaps what the temperature was, and what your heart rate was, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole bunch of things that you could note, and these things make you more aware of your physical existence, because as you start to observe yourself over time, over the years, you begin to understand how it is that your running evolves, because you're being more aware of it, because you over a long period of time have collected information about yourself. And as you know, we spend, especially people who work in industries like, say, like in the finance industry, you spend so much of your time focusing on the outside world and keeping track of numbers to do with the outside world, but it would be great to understand a bit more about yourself. And, we have so many devices, so many wearables that we can use. So for instance, I've got a really nice GPS watch, which at any point in time, even right now, it tells me like 18 different things about myself, including the time of the sunset, which is not about me, but about something that I enjoy. But to journal and note these things down is really key. So I can tell you pretty much for any run that I've done in the last, last 7-8 years, whom I ran with, what time I woke up, what distance I ran, the route I ran, and this is without looking up a GPS map. I have made a note of it. I can tell you what elevation I went up and down. In the last few years, I could tell you what the temperature was and whether I ran on sand or whether I ran on the road. Now, you might think that, hang on, but what do you do with all of this data? And to be honest, perhaps I'll never use it again. But the act of making a note is key. So we talk about how journaling is really important for to have a practice of writing a diary or keeping a journal is really good for us. In some sense, this is that process of journaling being applied to your running. And And it's very specific. So perhaps someone will say, oh, I don't know what to write at the end of the day about my day. So much happened, I don't even remember. But with something like running, it's a small event, only a few things to note. So perhaps just doing that to start off with would be a good thing. So if you're someone who doesn't do any journaling of any kind, then that's a good way to again introduce a practice that should be good for us. I mean, I've been doing this for years, and I won't stop doing it. So that's again key. One of the things I wanted to talk about was injuries. Runners often get injured. Fortunately, running hasn't given me any injuries, at least over the last 10 years. And I think that if what you have is aches and pains, right, that's different from an injury. So you kind of had a tough run, or you had a race, you pushed yourself really hard, and some part of you hurts for a couple of days. I wouldn't classify that as an injury, but even to be mindful of that. So if you're someone who does get injured because you perhaps push the mileage too much, or your running technique isn't right, then use that injury as a teacher, right? Let the teacher in. Don't fight it, right? Take rest and ask yourself, what is it that I did wrong that perhaps I could correct going into the future, right? And that's this is where you're using even your injury to become a better person, and to reach sort of a better state of self-awareness. Now, I should have said this right at the start. One of the key things to understand is actually what mindfulness is. So people will often think that when you meditate and you reach the state of mindfulness, then you have no thoughts, right? And that's absolutely not true. What you should be doing is try to push all the thoughts out of your brain, right? Humans aren't meant to do that. We're not meant to have no thoughts. It's supposed to be, we think all the time. So it would be very unnatural to reach that state. The key thing is to have control over your thoughts, right? To not have monkey brain having control over everything that you're thinking about and doing. And that's what's key. So you definitely don't want to be pushing all your thoughts out. And it's not about slowing your mind down either, right? It's not about thinking slowly. Not at all. In fact, the more mindful you become and the better you become at this, you will actually become faster at your thinking, right? Because you'll just see things much more clearly. You'll be more incisive. When someone presents a problem, you will be able to get to the root of the problem more quickly, be able to ask the right questions, and come up with a solution much more easily. So these are sort of the benefits of becoming more mindful, and we're thinking of using running and all of the things I talked about, pre-run, during the run, post-run, in order to develop that. And then that allows you to use your mindfulness through running in all the other aspects of your life, including other mindfulness practices. So, for instance, if you meditate, you might find that you're running, as you become more mindful of your running, you get more out of your meditation practice, or the prayer that you do, whatever that might be. So all of these things kind of have to work together. And like I said, you don't want to be running ultra crazy long distances. You want to just be more mindful. And the way we get the most out of all the things that we do is not by being extreme, but by finding things which are not perfectly correlated with each other, all of which contribute to a better state of existence. So, if someone says, kale is a super healthy thing, and mushroom, these are like two superfoods, and all they're going to do is eat kale and mushroom, right? That would be a stupid way to do things. I mean, kale is good for you and mushrooms are good for you, but the best thing to do is to have them as part of a much more diverse, plate in a typical meal or a typical day or in a typical week, right? So in the same way, you want to use your running and your mindfulness around running as a part of everything else that you put together. So that's I think the key thing, that everything is connected to everything, and so all of this has to work together. And related to all of this, so we think of running, and people will think of running and they'll think of hydration, and if they're running really long distances, we'll talk about fueling during a run. So if someone's running, say, 20 miles, say just over 30 kilometers, they might think of, oh, I need to fuel during the run. But then they probably won't think too much about how they eat the rest of the week, right? And the key thing is to be mindful of everything associated with your run, right? And including your sleep. Typically in India, because people don't want to go out in the sun, they will try to run only in the mornings. And so if they have jobs and they live in cities, they end up not getting enough sleep. And if you're not going to sleep right, then and you're not going to sleep enough, then your running is not going to be of much benefit to you because your brain health is going to suffer. And you may not realize it now, but if you're, say, 35, 40, 50 years old, but by the time you're 70, you'll regret having not slept enough, but gone out for a run, because you might have got physically fitter, but your brain's going to have declined. And of course, you'll still be better off than if you didn't run, but the whole waking up early in the morning and not getting enough sleep is going to work against you. So that's I think, a really key thing. Sometimes people will say, look, if you're so into mindfulness and all of this, then like, why do you go for events, right? Because that's all about other people and sort of this external, show. And I think the key thing to understand, if someone enjoys going to racing events and runs, it's not something you do 3 times a week, right? It might be a couple of times a year, or maybe once a month even. And that's okay, right? That's, it doesn't have to be this or that. That's something. In fact, one of the things to do is to observe how you are at an event and how your run was at an event relative to all your other runs. So, for instance, if you always run through the woods in your neighborhood, but then when you go to a running event that's through the town, right? You'll understand. You'll appreciate the running through the countryside and the woods relative to running in the city. And there'll be things about running in the town center that you'll appreciate relative to running on the roads. For instance, you can stop and buy water if you need to, right? It might be difficult to do in the woods. So that's one thing. The other things, and I talked about this, is wearables. So I've got this on. I also have a heart rate strap, and it goes around your chest, and you can get really much better readings of your heart rate. I actually won't use that much anymore. So unless I specifically need to check certain statistics about my run, but I'll actually use that heart rate monitor for a lot of other mindfulness practices that I do. And I kind of won't go into them here, but the key thing to understand is that any bit of technology that you use that might make you observe yourself better is a good thing. People will always curse technology, but it's not technology itself that's bad, right? Technology is just technology. It's about how you use it. So this phone I use to have this conversation with you sitting on this beach, but I could also use it to waste a lot of time and go through social media, which I don't. So it's literally a question of investing your hard-earned money on things that will make your future better. And it'll make your future better by helping you do the things that you enjoy in a more mindful way. Yeah, I think that's sort of a key thing. And so people will often say, oh, I don't wear a watch when I run, I just like run free. And they sort of they put that out as a sort of a status symbol that, look, I'm so evolved. I don't wear a watch, I just run, and I just run based on how I feel. I'm like, okay, great, but you know what? Like, having a bit more data and information about you is not necessarily a bad thing. It can only be a good thing. I'm not saying necessarily look at your watch while you're running. Perhaps you don't want to do that. I look at my watch when I'm running. I have targets even when I'm doing a training run. I'm checking the distance I'm running. I observe myself, observe my heart rate. I want to be more mindful because sometimes you don't quite know what you're doing and the numbers will talk. And I've mentored so many people around the world doing so many things. And I can tell you that what people say they're doing is very different from what they're actually doing. And what people say they feel is very different from what they actually feel. So people might say, you know what, I think I get hypoglycemic and my blood sugar is really low. And you know what, and I take a sample of their blood and I send it to the lab, I find out they're diabetic, right? And so they have high blood sugar, not low. Or they might tell me that, they feel dizzy and they have hypertension, they have low blood pressure. So I have to tell them that low blood pressure isn't an illness, it's something that's transient. And when you actually start measuring the blood pressure, it's never low. They're in fact hypertensive, right? They should be doing something to bring their blood pressure down. So I think technology is there for our benefit, and we've just got to learn to use it right. And that this is, again, part of the whole being mindful part, that being mindful of what technology is there for. It's there for your benefit, and to use it right. I think the final thing that I'd like to say about this is something that's close to my heart, which is, so it just so happens I registered for a race that's going to be in Goa next weekend. I'm not particularly trained for it, but I'm just going to go around and meet other runners. I've run at this event 3 times before in the last 10 years. And it doesn't matter whether I win or lose in a race. I keep telling people that, you know what, the only person who cares about whether you won or lost in the race is you. But what really matters is what we do for other people around us and the planet and other creatures on this planet. So I think a key thing that I'd say to people is, if you are going to think of running and how mindfulness will play into all of this, then be mindful of how your running impacts the planet. So if you're going to drive 10 miles 3 times a week in order to go and run with a friend, you know what? The planet doesn't care that you're fitter, right? The planet cares that you burned a lot of fossil fuel just to run, right? This is equivalent to driving to the gym and taking the escalator up or the elevator up, right? It's, you know, I mean, it's great someone's doing something to take care of their health, but they're not being mindful about the planet. And I'm not saying you need to turn into a hippie. Like most people see me, I haven't worn a shirt for the last 17 days, but you know, I'm no hippie in the sort of standard sense. I don't drink, I don't smoke, any of those things. But I think the key thing is to understand that what matters is that we've borrowed this planet from future generations, and we've got to return it to them, and we better return it to them in a better state, or at least not in a worse state than what we found it in. And so I think if in becoming more mindful of what you eat, so does your eating that supports your running become worse for the planet? Are you saying no to locally grown vegetables and fruit that are good for you because you want to eat blueberries from North America or Californian almonds? I mean, I'm not saying don't have them, but don't, you know, there's always a balance that you need to strike. And I think this is the key message I want to give to people, or request that in being more mindful yourself, be also mindful of your impact on the planet. And beyond that, you know, if you're watching this and you've never run before, then I'd say if you like the idea of running, then take it up and be mindful of it from day one. I think when I started off trying to do distance running about 15 years ago, I wasn't mindful of it. I just ran mindlessly, and there wasn't much information around. I managed to get a book from the library, and it didn't tell you too much. I ended up getting injured. This is about 15 years ago. And then I kind of got smarter, and I said, look, this is not the way to do things. But if you get into running today, there's information around. Be mindful of it. Don't rush into running. Don't think of doing crazy mileage. You know, be a scientist. Even if you weren't a student of science, you can be a scientist. You can research what are the best techniques for running. Don't be obsessed with the gear. I don't care really what shoes I wear. The thing I have invested in is something that actually tells me something about myself, which is this watch. But if you decide you're not going to run, then whatever it is, the mindfulness practice that you decide to do, if you think that it works for you, then push it in a gradual and sensible manner, and don't ever give it up. I think people don't realize the importance of consistency. They'll do something because they've heard it's supposed to be good, and then they give it up because perhaps they didn't enjoy it or they couldn't see the benefits. Some things just take time, right? You can't get pregnant and have a baby in 2 months, right? It takes 40 weeks to have a child. So, and then after that, you've got to raise it for God knows how many years. So the key thing is to understand that whatever it is you're doing, whether it's meditation or prayer or learning a new language, you can get more mindful with all of these things. But the key thing is to stick on with it. Don't be someone who says, I used to do this and I used to do that. Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be running. Like I say, you don't need to run to be fit, but whatever it is that you choose to do, just do it for long enough, because that's when the rewards will come. The passage of time is what will allow the benefits to compound, and you'll observe them happening, and you'll be more aware of them, and you'll benefit from them. And over time, many of these things that you'll do will all work to come together beautifully. So I'm here in Goa. I've been learning Konkani for the last couple of years, but never really had much of a chance to speak it. But now that I'm here for longer, I get to speak Konkani many times a day, and that's great for me. So, it's not something that I decided on doing 2 years ago. I just decided that if I was going to learn this, then I was going to do it systematically and not give up. So similarly with running, I can, I like the idea of running till the last day, my last day on this planet. It's another 70 years to go, hopefully. But the key thing is, at least that's my intention. And I think to have that intention is important, as opposed to, I want to do this because I heard it's really good, and I'm going to try it for a couple of months. And that's not the way to be. That's just not the way to be. So yeah, that's pretty much what I kind of have to say today. If anyone's interested, they can Google me, Puru the Guru, and then they'll find this Mindfulness and Running article, and they can read that at leisure. But that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I don't know if you have any questions, Shonali. Just as a goodbye, I'll show you I don't know if you can see you can't quite see the sunset, but
wow.
So that's the sky that we have there. And I'm going to spend the next hour and a half here and then go back and have my breakfast.
Perfect. Perfect. Puru, you were talking about mindfulness and running as in a functional form of exercise. So I was kind of linking it up with my dancing, where I feel that dancing for me is a kind of workout. So like you said, we don't have to really just do running for the sake of it.
But, no, in fact, you will be more mindful when you learn to dance, right? Yes, you have to be. Yes, in fact, this is the problem with running, because we run from when we are children, right? So, and therefore, when people in their sort of adult lives typically take up recreational running, they run assuming that it's a natural thing to do, which it is. But the fact of the matter is that in the time that they weren't running, they forgot how to run like children run when they run barefoot around the house. And therefore they pick up wrong running practices, and therefore they get injured. And of course, they've been through their whole lives of, ego and chasing this and that and the other, because of this is how society is. And that creates more problems. But for sure, definitely, for someone who says that they dance, I'd say, of course, you don't need to run, because dancing will keep you fit. And for sure, dancing makes you way more aware of yourself and your movements than perhaps running would. And which is why I say to people who run really well in terms of speed, that you're fast despite not running right. So just become more aware, not for the sake of necessarily because you will run faster, and you will, but because what really matters in the end is how mindful you are. At the end of the day, when you're old and you're living the last few years of your life, you might not be able to run, but you should still be more mindful of your existence and all the other things about you. And so running should work to take you to that point in time, right? In the same way that your dance will do that. So I know I love dancing And I know exactly what you mean, and I would definitely say to you that, look, if you decide that you're never going to run again and you're just going to only dance and it's going to keep you fit and it's going to make you more mindful, I'd say go for it. Right? The key thing is that there are a lot of people who don't have the time to and the patience to learn how to dance, and they have busy lives and they want to go and run. And I said that let your running work to make you more mindful. That's what's key,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
And yeah, so.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, viewers, wasn't that amazing? I just got drawn into all the things which Puru was saying, and I was trying to make links with my life as well. Like he was talking of functional running and how that kind of converts to my dancing and keeping fit. So, yeah, I'm sure you all have taken something from this and will incorporate Puru's advice, tips, which is given us about running, about mindfulness running. I'm sure we are going to all incorporate that when we go out and get fit. So thank you everyone for watching. Please post your comments and questions if you have any. Wishing you all from Triveni Media team and from me, Chunali, an amazing December, a fabulous Christmas, and a very, very happy New Year to you. Well, it's a beautiful sunny morning here in UK today, and I'm going to grab my running shoes now and head out to the woods. The forest is calling. Bye.